Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare. Welcome back, Bookends. We are so happy to share with you our book club pick for the month of April. The 5 Sorrowful Mysteries of Anti-Africa is not only the best title for a book, but it is also our choice for April. A bittersweet gem chronicling the coming-of-age story of a young Nigerian boy, this debut combines an infinitely charming character study with biting satirical comment about the westernisation of the African continent.
Stephen Buoro is a writer from Nigeria. He has a first-class degree in mathematics and studied his MA in creative writing at the University of East Anglia, where he was the 2018 recipient of the Booker Prize Foundation Scholarship. In 2020, he was awarded second place in the Deborah Rogers Foundation Writers Award for his debut novel, which will be published in the UK and US this month with Bloomsbury. And we are delighted to have Stephen joining us today. So welcome, Stephen, to A Pair of Bookends.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what we always like to start with is to ask you what you are currently reading.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a huge question now because I'm currently reading my PhD thesis, so and just revisiting some of the sources and all that, and so that's what I'm currently reading. So lots of like academic stuff and all, and
just something light then.
Yeah. So I think a novel I recently read. I've read a number of books recently. I read Boots by the States, a British writer, the States. So it's this wonderful novel about girlhood, and it's set in Florida. The sense of description in the novel, it's really wonderful. I mean, you could feel like a tactile sense of the place, right? I felt as though I had visited Florida, and smells. The streets and all that. It was just really wonderful. Yeah, and I've read some books recently anyway, other books. But I think, that's one of the recent reads, so far.
Amazing. And when do you finish your PhD?
Yeah, I think that's up to my supervisors and my examiners, right? But so I'm hoping to finish, let's say this summer, sometime this summer, hopefully, if everything goes perfectly, and
wow.
They'll move on to other things in life and all.
So just bringing out a novel and finishing a PhD in the same year, no biggie.
Whatever.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? I just have no choice, but it's been a wonderful journey so far. Of course, as you can imagine, it's very, very stressful. Deadlines, so many demands for attention and all that, and but it's what it is, and I should just do my very best to enjoy the whole process.
Now, I would love to start, Stephen, by asking on the subject of your novel, where the inspiration for your debut came from and what the experience has been like in having it published.
Okay, so I think in many ways, looking back now, I think I've been preparing myself for this novel. Every piece of writing I had done, every book I had read before I began writing the book. So they were just preparations anyway. So I think the day that the fuse, whatever was lit and everything came together and I began the main journey of writing this book was one evening in June 2018. I was in my living room in Nigeria, and then this voice just comes to me, and it's this powerful voice that wants to be heard, a voice full of so much shame, so much guilt, and a voice that wanted to be heard. And then I just had to pick up my Blackberry. I had a Blackberry phone then, a Blackberry 8520 then that I used for writing. I grabbed my phone and I just started writing and writing. It was so fun, so visceral, so amazing, an amazing experience. And then after reading what I had written, I discovered that was the most powerful piece of writing I had composed up to that time in my life. And that piece became the opening of my novel. It's still the opening of my novel now. And of course, the novel has been through so many changes, and but it's just been a wonderful experience, discovering who I am as a writer. Before writing this book, I didn't know, I could write something like this. A book that's, some readers have described as funny or tragicomic and all that. And I thought I was a different sort of writer anyway. And it's just funny seeing what I've come up with anyway. And so I'm looking forward to discovering more of myself, in my subsequent work.
Yes. Did you not always think you were going to write a novel? Did this idea just come to you, but you'd never kind of toyed with the idea before?
I always knew that I was good to write a novel. The novel form was my very first literary love, right? When I was little, I didn't really like poetry. I know I was like, why do you have to be so coded and things? I know. Anyway, but as a teenager, I fell in love with poetry, like crazy in love with poetry. So it was just this wonderful way of, examining myself, of experimenting with form as a writer, of also passing messages to friends, like in a very coded way, which was very, very fun. And it's a piece you can just complete very, very quickly. But like all the pieces of writing, like the writing I read when I was little, most of them were just, I mostly read novels. Of course, I read plays as a teenager. Of course, I read poems and all that. But I just love the novel form because I felt you could do almost anything in a novel. You could play with form, you could examine different themes, you could carry a reader through just different forms of experience and different acts of experience. You could expose them to many things and also examine yourself in many, many ways. And even as a writer, like just try different tonalities and all that. And I'm like in this novel, you would see some things that I don't think you would usually do like in a short story. For example, there's some playing experimentations of form in the novel. Some poetry, practice of poetry to describe things that he feels are too huge to be described in prose and all that. So I always knew that I'm going to write a novel, and I'm so happy. It's finally come to pass, right? Yeah. So
we're so happy that it's it's so good. So yeah,
I was like, yeah, no, we're happy. We're the happy ones. I wanted to chat to you a little bit about the cast of characters in the novel. They're each unique and captivating and absolutely fascinating, each in their own right. What was it like to develop and create this brilliant cast?
Well, the process of writing, like a lot of the things that happen are so, they're so like intuitive, right? Things that are not so overt. You don't actually know exactly like what happened, like how did these things come about? Just like what I just described, the very first moment of inspiration is something I still cannot understand how it happened and all that. But I think, of course, by environment, the people I knew, the people I was interested in, like we're just these very unique people, and again, it also relates to my own personal taste in books, the kind of writers I love reading. I love to just have this interesting cast of characters. For example, I remember when I was younger, when I read like Shakespeare, and then like for example, when you read Macbeth, you see like the porter who opens the door, like he's just a unique character on his own. Just the extras in the play are all just unique people who stay with you afterwards, and it's something that I wanted to bring to the page because I think the world is full of just different, unique people, and I think that is a fun of the whole novel form to describe that's this complicated, diverse arc of humanity, the human nature, the human struggle, and like each novel is just trying to like create like a kind of a periscope actually to different aspects of humanity and all that, and which is why the novel form is hugely, hugely interesting. Yeah,
and they were really well fleshed out characters, which is always a joy to read.
Yes, and I had so much fun. Writing them, and I just wanted to discover who they were, and they kept surprising me, of course, right? And some of these characters had like some of my interests, my personal interests, or the personal interests of my friends growing up, and this Droogs, his friends, Slim and Moroka. Slim is a painter, and Moroka is a rapper. And when I was a teenager, I used to have friends like that. I was actually part of a kind of a rap collective or something, and we go around like rapping and all that. And so I just wanted to bring that friendliness, that humor, those aspects of growing up or coming of age, and where young people use these different forms of arts to understand themselves, to deal with the difficulties of growing up, the paradoxes of the world, the complexities of their situations, and I just wanted to bring all that in the novel, and
Well, you certainly did. Now, in your novel, your protagonist Andy, he says life in Africa is a long prayer, and I felt that the way you write about Nigeria, and specifically, I don't know if I'm going to mispronounce this, but Kontagora, where Andy lives.
Yeah.
Okay, good. where Andy lives, I feel like the way you write, it provides like a real sensory experience for the reader, which is funny as you were speaking about the book that you've recently read and how you felt like you were immersed in Florida. And I felt really immersed in their world with your book. Even just a simple scene that you'd written of him walking down the street, and you've got like, you can hear the crackling fire where people are cooking, you can taste the plantain that people are eating, and you can smell and I'm quoting here, you can smell the piss streams that they're stepping over, and it's very vivid and like visceral. And whilst there is this like real kind of beauty about like the world that he inhabits, there's also like a sort of undercurrent of violence and fear throughout. And I just wanted to know kind of what did you want to capture about contemporary life in Africa? And how much did your own experiences play into this?
Yeah, I mean, my country, Nigeria, is this hugely, it's a massive country. I mean, several times Britain, right? And so much is happening in there. I mean, so many interesting things. Like Nigeria, you can see Nigeria in a way as like 3-4 countries, or 5, in fact, or whatever, more than that. I mean, I was forced to be together by colonialism and all that. And so there's just so much going on. I mean, like you can just walk on the streets, I mean, of a Nigerian town, of any arbitrary Nigerian town, and you could just see like 100 things to write about as a writer. I mean, there's so much happening and so much life and so much aliveness or whatever that I strongly wanted to capture. I mean, yeah. And of course, some of the stylistic choices I use, for example, like the novel is a first person present tense narrative, and so that wherever, like where Andy like moves around his world, when he moves around the streets, around his neighborhood. I mean, like I just wanted to create that huge immediacy, that sense that the reader is with him, the reader can smell the things he smells, see the things he sees, hear the sounds he hears. So I wanted to depict all these things. I mean, yeah, I think it's for the reader to judge, but I think I did my very best here. And my subsequent book, I also want to do more and more, because it's this hugely fascinating place. I mean, contemporary Nigeria and cotton growing, for example, which I depicted here. I mean, these are hugely interesting places. I mean, a country still trying to discover its identity, just like Andy, my protagonist, trying to discover who he is and still the country. So I just wanted to capture as much as I could without overwhelming the reader and without making it like a huge, descriptive, pile or something. Yeah. And just, be very, very aware to give the reader exactly what I think they would need. And yeah.
Absolutely.
I think you did a beautiful job. So
thank you.
Yes, completely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we can't talk really about Andy without talking about his mother. She's a focal point of the narrative, and as a mum myself, when I read about her and about her shielding Andy from a lot of the horrors of her past and from a lot of the horrors of the situation that they have to live in some respects, it really resonated with me. As Andy comes of age, we kind of see him have this sense of loss. He starts to lose his mum in more ways than one, without giving too much away. What was it like for you to create that kind of dynamic duo?
Yes, the relationship between Andy and his mother is just this very powerful, and painful and sad relationship, right? I mean, she's the very first person in his world, the very first woman in his world. Because you see the narrative, the book is more about, in a way, the book is about how Andy relates to the closest women to him. I mean, from Eileen, Zara, Fatima, and most especially his mother. To Andy, she's somebody who he hugely loves, and also, feels so much shame about. He's so ashamed about, because one, she's this person with huge potential, very, very huge potential. She's very brilliant. She's very creative. She's a photographer and all that. But she's this person who is so failed. The post-coloniality of Nigeria has failed her so much. I mean, on the one hand, she's uneducated. She has been unable to achieve her full potential. On the other hand, again, she suffers so much misogyny. She's been abused suffered so much physical, emotional abuse from her previous husbands and all. And of course, she suffered so much loss. I mean, she's lost many children. She suffered miscarriages and lost, a child that's Andy's older brother through a stillbirth and all that. And that loss, that huge feeling of loss, I think it's one that Andy ends up inheriting, because we know of trauma. Trauma can be intergenerational, can pass from one generation to the other. And so all that huge feeling of loss is, I think, that things Andy has inherited, and which he like views through the angle of HSBX, the so-called Curse of Africa. That the Curse of Africa has made his situation failed, and so that complication, I think, is one at the heart of this novel, and that's love and hatred, because Andy's mother also represents his nation in a way. He loves that huge love for his country and for his nation, for his continent, and also the huge shame that it also brings, the rejection to it brings because of the failures and all about it all.
Yeah, it's we've said before on the podcast, haven't we, Lyd, that we love a mother-child dynamic. They're probably the most interesting and complex sort of relationships to read about, and I really felt like you captured that, all of the trauma that she's experienced and the way she's kind of passing that on to Andy without necessarily meaning to. It's just her way of dealing with it, isn't it? But yeah, I thought you wrote them so well. Now,
well, thank you. Yeah.
It's just going to be basically us complimenting you. So
no, thanks. Yeah.
Now, throughout the book, Andy often has discussions with his auntie Zara and his friend Fatima, and their various studies and theories sort of relating to mathematics. And I think the term is anifuturism, which I believe is an ideology that fuses animism and Afrofuturism, and the sort of debates of intellectual thought seem to be a total contrast to the world they inhabit that is kind of consumed by religious thought. Why was it important to you to present these contrasts?
Yeah. So in the novel, right, the reader sees that Andy seems to detest his country, his situation. His skin color, his blackness, his Africanness, whatever. And he seems to detest this thing because he loves these things on the one hand. On the other hand, because he feels, for example, his country, his continent has failed him. They've not given him the opportunity to achieve the full potential that he has. And this narrative from Andy, of course, stemmed from, the whole violence of colonialism and all these kind of things, that the kind of message that colonialism passes to their subjects, to the post-colonial subjects, that you're not good enough, you're not beautiful, everything about you is nonsense. That the white guys, the imperialists brought God to you, brought all the good stuff to you and all. So having that narrative on the one hand, and on the other hand, having a narrative about that looks at Africa from a different point of view, from the point of view of pride and of wonderful heritage, which is what Zara talks about in the novel. She fuses animism and Afrofuturism. She reclaims the whole theory of animism, because animism, in the past, has been this theory that has been used as a form of violence, in a way that all African systems of thoughts are primitive and all that. And so whenever Zara reclaims all that, and by creating these interesting movements, religious movements, social movements called anifuturism, that attempts to reclaim the Blue Days, wonderful, huge, wonderful heritage of Africa, and parts of Africa, and of course, and to also project Africans to a wonderful future, a future to which we've also been denied in many ways. So this is a counter narrative to Andy, because I find novels that are very much balanced, and they have multifaceted, very interesting, because I wouldn't want to just see one theory of examining things. I want to see also the counter narrative, the counter theory, to see how they both interact with each other, how they both speak to each other, and they all come alive, whatever, in Andy and in his life and in his friends, amongst his friends, and all that.
Absolutely.
It also feels like he finds comfort in all of his theories and these sort of intellectual discussions that he has. It's like there's some horrendous things going on outside of his home, politically and socially, but then he has these discussions, and it's something that he can kind of understand and comprehend, which he's unable to with all of the violence that's going on outside. It just feels like a thing that really brings him comfort. Now, obviously, you studied mathematics yourself. And I am someone, and I think Lydia is also someone, that feels completely lost when it comes to maths. What attracts you to it?
I don't know. I think my mother, she didn't have the privileges, the opportunities I've had in life, I know, and so she really just had very basic education, but she's very, very mathematical. Her mathematical mind, it's just really amazing, and not just her mathematical mind, her literary mind too. Because growing up, when I speak to my mother, we speak in windows with different kinds of figures of speech. We have so much fun together anyway. And I don't know, perhaps that was where it all came. For me, right? In secondary school, I had this wonderful, maths teacher. I've loved maths when I was in primary school, but more so in secondary school. I had this wonderful maths teacher who made me to say, the beauty of mathematics, and not just the beauty, but why it matters, and why some of these theories that might seem so random, and what they say about the world, and how like mathematics is also a different and also an important way of looking at the world, and for me too, from the books I've also read, from the books I read growing up, let's say a book like when I read, I was as a little child, like a book like The Swiss Family Robinson, that seems to incorporate aspect of science and the art. So growing up, I didn't see these two disciplines as so far from each other. I just saw them as maybe a bit parallel, but they're different ways, different facets of looking at the same thing, right? Both of them are both philosophy, in a way. One isn't much more definite, well-defined structures, that is mathematics, and literature isn't much more nuanced structures for examine the kinds of problems that the maths cannot examine, and that's what again the book, my novel, tries to do, right? Andy uses some of this mathematical theory to try to understand these incomprehensible things about his situation, about his country, his continent, and all that. Yeah,
absolutely. I feel like it makes a huge difference if you've got a really good maths teacher.
Definitely.
Yes, it usually does. It usually does. It's like a good math teacher just makes everything just really worth it. And it's just, somebody who understands the whole process, the difficulty. Mathematics is difficult, and that's something, but it's also very fun, and it's also really worth it. And I think in many ways, we are all mathematical too, right? Every day whether we are mathematicians or not, we apply mathematical, theories or ideas in our day-to-day lives. Mathematics is very, very logical. Logical systems of thought, and we always apply logic in our statements, in the way we just do things. So in a way, we're all mathematicians anyway. So
I am
Does that
definitely
mean
not.
I'm a mathematician? All right.
Definitely not.
So moving on, before me and Hannah become mathematicians, we meet Andy at a hugely pivotal time in his life. I think we all remember being teenagers, some of us more fondly than others. And a lot of Andy's world revolves around kind of this sort of sexual awakening, that he's starting to become more aware of his sexual preferences and his fantasies. What did you want to explore when writing Andy's fantasies and sexual encounters?
So in the novel, Andy, is obsessed with blonde women, whiteness, the West, and all that. And this is something exciting, and it's something very important, because many people from where I come from, we are just so much inundated, immersed in Western culture and many things, and as I said again, the whole legacy of colonialism, and we've been fed these ideas that, these things about the West is perfect, the West is this, you should try to be like someone from the West, you should try to accept the Western systems of thought, Western systems of beauty. For example, that Western standards of beauty too. For example, a woman is really beautiful if she's tall, she's slim, she's blonde, and that is what you should seek out for. And so I wanted to examine all that too. As I said, the legacy of colonialism, and of course, in many ways, Eileen, the blonde British girl that Andy falls in love with, she represents this allure of the West, and in some way too, you could also say she represents this internalized racism, or this appropriated racial oppression that he's been sold, he's been fed, that he encounters in throughout his whole life, like growing up in his community as a post-colonial object, as a post-colonial product. So she represents all this stuff, and I also wanted to use that to explore, of course, desire, failure, and all this very interesting stuff about being a teenager and all that. And especially, of course, also wanted to examine how like some of these decisions that are made randomly in the West here. For example, like in Hollywood boardrooms, I mean, they make these huge decisions that they don't know actually have huge ramifications. I mean, worldwide. I know. I mean, the whole Hollywood executives will sit in their boardrooms and say, "Oh, okay, perhaps we should just have, let's say, one black woman in this film, and maybe a black guy. Yeah, but more than one or two would just be too much." And so yeah, and this character. So the impact of all these decisions that might seems very little. I mean, it's very huge. Like growing up in Nigeria, that most of the many Nigerians like myself, we grew up consuming Hollywood movies, and then I mean, you don't see like growing up. I didn't see any like black person playing a superhero. I didn't see like a black woman being in any notable film. I mean, you would see Angelina Jolie in the best action films, you see Kate Winslet in Titanic, you see all this stuff, but yeah, and so all this have huge ramifications, which is one of the reasons why I'm writing this, why I wrote this book. And
yeah, representation is hugely important. But Lydia, I think you would have been in with a chance with Andy. So, yeah, he's the blonde. But I think
in this light.
But I think like the scenes between Andy and Eileen were so frustrating to read at times, because he'd obviously got this idea in his mind about like the perfect woman, and he like really wanted to believe that this was her. And then, you know, when he kind of has these interactions with her, she says some like really questionable things, and you're just like, red flag, no, please get out of there, Andy, like just don't give her the time of day. And he continues to pursue her, and you can see moments where he's kind of like on the cusp of being like, is this strange what she's saying? Is like she a nice person? And then he's just like, oh well, she's a beautiful blonde woman I've always wanted, so I'm just going to ignore all of that and continue to pursue her.
And he's 15. I mean, like,
he's 50. Yeah, we'll give him a break. No, I was pulling my hair out though. I was like, no, please, just go away from this woman.
Also Eileen too. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I mean, Eileen too. She's young. I mean, she's also 15, and she's also like. I mean, that dynamic is also. I mean, a great way to examine, like, the complicated ways that, I mean, not just interracial relationships happen, but also, of course, I mean, like between like white and black people relate to each other. And I mean, because, I mean, she's been fed many things too, many like prejudices. And yeah, and these things come out perhaps unconsciously from her. And she's doing her very best to love Andy. Like, she wants to ignore many things, ignore that, oh, he's black, he's Nigerian, he doesn't know how to make, I mean, an avocado toast, all this kind of stuff. And
avocado
so,
toast.
I mean, so like she's doing her very best to ignore all these things. I mean, to love him, but I mean, she's who she is, and she's also 15, and she's discovering the world, she's understanding things, and which makes the dynamic so interesting, because you can see where she's coming from. You can see, I mean, the narrative that she's inherited, that she's been fed, and we also see that of Andy too. And we also see how they both fetishize each other and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting.
It is such an interesting dynamic to read, but that avocado toast moment that you just mentioned killed me. Not the avocado toast.
Not the avocado
It was
toast.
such a stressful like couple of pages worth of reading. I was like, I've never been so stressed out by avocado toast. And he's like, I'm gonna get a video
It's
up.
the Googling, it's the YouTube on his phone. I'm like, no. Oh no, bless him.
Now, just on obviously Andy and Eileen, there was another character that I really loved, and that was Fatima. And I really loved hers and Andy's friendship, and I found it quite moving in parts. And you know, they have this beautiful connection, and they can relate to each other through a number of things. And then when he meets Eileen, there's a kind of a total sense of betrayal that Fatima feels. And it doesn't just seem to be about him abandoning their potential. It also seems to be a betrayal of his race from her perspective, because he's pursuing a white girl. What did their friendship represent to you, and sort of this whole clash with race and class?
Yeah, that friendship represents so many things, so many huge, interesting things. For me, it's one of the saddest part of the book. I mean, you see two people who seem to be like perfectly made for each other, but I mean that they can't be together because of so many things. Religion being one of them, right? like the irony for me about the book, this like love triangle between Andy, Eileen, and Fatima is it's how Andy thinks, oh, like it's easier for him to be with Eileen. That is somebody like Eileen who is so different from him and who is so different. Yeah, and than somebody like Fatima who is so similar. I mean, because of how the whole post-colonial situation is so complicated. Like religion, for example, is it's a very, very huge thing in Nigeria. I mean, it's a huge factor, a huge system that predominates almost every other system, like in Nigeria, where I grew up in. Yeah, and so the relationship represents this whole complication of the whole post-colonial experience, and it's just one of the saddest aspects of the book. Yeah, I really wish Andy and Ali could get on together and become a couple and all that, but it's a very complicated situation too. Yeah, it is very sad.
He also did that really frustrating thing where he pursued Eileen and left poor Fatima, and then he sees her sitting with another boy.
Yeah.
He gets so jealous. Yeah. And you're like, oh no, you've had your moment.
No.
Yeah.
Have your cake and eat it. No, thank you.
Yeah, I find that scene very funny too. Yeah, it's and I also find it very sad because like he knows, like, yeah, I mean, like she's the person meant for him. I mean, he calls her, he deletes some letters from her name and calls her his fate, right? Yeah, and but still he doesn't go with her.
Absolutely. It's very frustrating. It was very frustrating. And I think one of the scenes that I found just so difficult was he comes from kind of Fatima's sat in front of him like, I'm here, I'm right here, just look. And he can't do it. And then he goes for like dinner with Eileen and they're sat having this meal in public and he's a bit kind of like, I think he feels a bit inadequate and a bit kind of like he doesn't know what to do. He's looking at the cutlery like, this is not how I eat. And I think that it's one of those things like she touches his hair and I'm like, get off. And it just perfectly epitomizes the kind of differences in the way that he feels when he's sat with Eileen and when he's sat with Fatima, because they are very different women. And I think that it's so interesting to see those kind of that mirror each other in these scenes.
Yeah, like I mean, both of them, like Eileen and Andy, I mean, they both criticize each other. I mean, she touches his hair. He's so obsessed with her hair, of course. I mean, yeah, and this difference, and this difference is what is so striking because he like when Andy's with her and Andy's like in this performance mode, like he wants to impress, he wants to be this guy who she would love, she would be obsessed with, whatever. But with Fatima, I mean, he's like so natural. I mean, they're just great friends, right? They have so much in common, and he's more of he's more of himself with Fatima, and it's just very sad. How, I mean, we always run away from things that we are like our destinies or things that we are meant to, that are like designed to look to our taste, to who we are, to ourselves, and we decide we go for things that usually beyond us, and that is just at the heart of our human situation, I think. Yeah. But in this case, it's also just very sad. It's all from all the narratives that Andy has been fed. Yeah, from, I mean, even before he was born, and I mean that he has to, like, I mean, desire the West. He has to desire a white woman. Yeah, that and Eileen was just the only route to, I mean, success, to a great life, to happiness. And when she might not really be that truth.
You're breaking our hearts, Stephen. Not happy about it.
But I mean, like the crazy thing is that Eileen actually doesn't have very much going for her. She's not a particularly interesting person.
No, I mean she is very interesting. I mean she and Andy also have great interests together. I mean they love books. They talk about Kafka and all that. And I mean she wants to be a translator. She wants to translate stuff, and I also wonder how what that says about their relationship, and like how does she translate all this stuff, the difficulties and the complications to her own self, and where would it take her anyway, like in the post narrative space, like how would that life turn out to be and all that. And she's very, very interesting to me anyway.
It's always so funny speaking to writers, because you have us as the readers having formed our own opinions about specific characters, and then you've got the writer who has had to inhabit each of their minds and probably has a lot more empathy. And I'm like, no, I'm on Andy's side. I'm not having anybody hurting Andy. And you're like, actually, no.
I really enjoyed writing their scenes together. I mean, they were some of the most difficult scenes to write, of course. I mean, I can remember chapters like chapter 10. I wrote part of it was so difficult. I had to write part of that on my phone. I mean, I wrote a good, like half of the novel actually on my phone. I mean, maybe not. Like, let's just say like let's say 1/4 or something or so, or whatever. I wrote up to nearly half of the novel on my phone, and of course it went through so many revisions, of course, on my laptop and all that. But like since like chapters like chapter 10, for example, I had to write, it was so difficult. I had to write it on my phone. I had to be like so present, like in the dialogue, exchanges and all. And it was so fun writing, and of course, very, very difficult because I'm like, oh, like, what does she think? What is she thinking? Is she seeing everything that's happening? And like, what is her life like? I mean, she's so different from who I am and from me. And yeah.
Do you think that, because I had no idea that you'd written, obviously I had no idea that you'd written half of it on your phone, which is amazing. But there's certain language that you use that's kind of like text language. So, you'll say like ASAP, or I think you wrote to be honest at one point. And do you think writing it on your phone made you feel a bit more free with the language that you used?
Yeah, I think so. Because I'm writing this novel, right? This book is about, like, when I write, I was saying to myself, so I'm writing this book about this 15-year-old boy, and yeah, so just to, perhaps the phone, I'm writing on the phone, perhaps usually help me to create that sense of immediacy, that connectedness, with this fictional character. Our phones are like our most personal devices, right? Perhaps even closer than our underwear, because now they will change our underwear, right? But we'll let's keep our phones with us, and and it's this device too that because it's so personal, and sometimes as a writer, when you want your most critical voices to go to sleep and all, like you just can just lie down on your bed and you just get on writing. You can sit on your bed and you just write stuff on your phone, and I found some of the scenes, for example, scenes that involved huge dialogue, many huge dialogue scenes in the novel, where there are many significant plot developments that take place in the form of dialogue. For example, I think like chapter 10, for example, chapter 10, when Andy and Eileen are together in a house in Abuja. So like that scene, like I needed to feel every emotional pulse. I needed to control, and so that I could be able to manipulate and control, the emotional pulses, whatever, as they go into that. The scene doesn't just get out of hand, or the reader loses interest. So just to be very, very involved, like to be intensely involved in those scenes. So like my phone was just the perfect device for writing such scenes. I remember lying down while writing part of that chapter. I was just lying down and writing. Yeah. So it was really fun, maybe, but also tough.
That's amazing.
I think that immediacy, though, that kind of sense of being there, it comes across so well, because you do, people talk about page turners and things like this when we talk about books, but this is very much kind of in that kind of ilk, because you are with him the whole time. You are there, and you want to live it scene by scene. And I think that the way that you write is very evocative of that, and it makes you want to stay with him the whole time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yes, that's something I also strongly wanted to do in this novel, because one, Andy is 15, and I wanted the reader to just, to do the very best to explore all the tools at my disposal, the stylistics and all, to ensure that the reader can get to feel that sense of this boy's life as a 15-year-old, and like that whole experience. Where he moves from scene to scene, what he sees and all that. So, and of course, so I decided to write the book in this first person present tense point of view. And it happened very organically, and I didn't even think about it. It was so unconscious. But it really helped to, the idea, whatever, to build the story scene by scene, because there's some, novels that tend to use like past person, let's say past tense, whatever, third person, let's say past tense, or first person past tense narratives. They could just switch from one scene to the other, and they are very, very helpful to writers, because you could just write, you could just develop things without doing the hard work and all. But this was so difficult to do. And many readers might not fully appreciate how difficult it was to do, like to ensure that I was developing the story scene by scene, so that anything that happens in the novel, something actually does happen. And each scene is not just like a flash or something, like it scene develops fully as though like it's like a kind of a TV drama, right? Like a TV drama where you are it's scene and things happen. It's scene has an arc, has a structure and all that. So all that, I try to do that as seamlessly as I could, and yeah.
Amazing. Now, my last question for you, I wanted to speak on the characters' connection to their dead. Obviously, there are the graveyards in their homes, Andy's sort of ongoing conversations with his dead brother, the putting the food out for spirits, I guess. But why did you choose to feature the dead and spirits as much as the living?
Yeah, I think one of the lines, in this book, I think in the first chapter is where Andy says that I think when you are younger, you are closer to the world of the unborn, to the world of the recently dead. I think if I quoted that correctly. Yeah, and like I'm just like Andy. I'm also a sorcerer, right? And in my culture, like dead people are like buried. Dead family members are like buried in the house, like in the compound and all that. Like my father is dead, and he's buried like in the living room of my house, in Ososo in Nigeria. Then, and the dead is part of us, and it's just. I think it's a way also of coming to terms with death, right? And also keeping it there with us and letting them be part of our lives. And because like you hear of people who have lost family members who, let's say for example, in a plane crash that happened somewhere, and so they don't even have like the corpse to bury, or they have no remains of the person, and there's always that huge sense of emptiness and should I say like unfulfilled, not just unfulfilled, but like this huge emptiness anyway, that and this liminal space where the person seems as if the person isn't dead. And I see the person is also still in existence. I see the person is dead and still not dead at the same time because there's no proof to show. You have no remains to show that this person has gone. You have nothing to keep it yourself. So I think it's a wonderful aspect of my culture anyway. And so the dead is always playing with us, and and so that's a huge topic. I love to go into like animistic interpretations of death and all that. But and spirits and all that are part of many like African societies, animistic like beliefs and all that. Yeah,
we had Chikadili Emelumadu on the podcast, who is also a Nigerian writer, and she was very much telling us about how you must leave food for the spirits and you must share your food with those that have passed, and the importance of that. Gave us a full-on lesson about this. But I think it really showed it to me in your book. It really showed how poor the Western world's relationship to death and grief is, because I feel like in your culture, certainly, there's a much more openness to it. And, like Auntie Lizzie in the book, her grief is, she doesn't care who sees her grief. She's totally open about it. She's lying on the floor sobbing. And I think that we could probably learn a thing or two from that openness to grief, not kind of trying to shut down that emotion and not shutting down our relationship with the dead and not wanting to talk about it. So there's a lot to be learned.
Don't get me started.
That's a powerful way. Yeah, actually, that's a very powerful thing you just said about actually about grief, how we relate to grief, and all that. I remember when my father died, and everyone was crying, everyone was putting. Everyone was. Then I was young anyway, but still, like I just couldn't. I just couldn't cry. I just couldn't. Whatever. I don't want to go into all that, but but grief and how we display grief and whatever. Let me not go too much. I'll keep thinking about this. It's something for me to think about. Thank you.
I think that's to do. It's a major thing about men's mental health as well. Is a whole other conversation, and I think you definitely showed that and portrayed that well through Andy. He constantly saying that he feels like he should cry, and he does cry. But there are moments when he wants to cry, but holds it back. And I just think there were so many things that were well portrayed with your book. So many things.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I think as well, what I wanted to touch on before we let you go was his fantastic kind of friendships with, particularly as you call them, the Droogs, his two closest friends, Slim and Morocco. They're both kind of fascinating friends for him, and they support him in ways that I don't really feel like they understand how intrinsic they are to each other, how important they are to each each other. What was it like creating those characters to support Andy? And did you have anyone in mind when you created them, or was it more of like you needed these people to be around him?
Yeah, I mean, I strongly needed, of course, them to be around him. I mean, Andy's a very friendly, I think, charming person, I think. And so, yeah, I mean, he has this wonderful group of friends. And I mean, the dynamic, the dynamic and the relationship was actually I think, easiest actually to do, right? I mean, just so unconscious. And I mean, I really love them. I mean, the banter they bring and all that. I think in a way, perhaps, it was inspired by some of my closest friends growing up. I mean, I had these very artistic friends, and I mean, we'd always laugh. We'd do things together, and of course, but that's just so different. I mean, for my childhood friends, and I mean, a number of things I've done in this book that I think some readers might just think, oh, okay, he just wrote about his life. He just wrote about the people he knew, but and so they may not give me enough credit, but there's so much, many things here. Just things I had to do from scratch. I just had to discover. I had to write and write and write. I threw many things away, started from scratch. I suffered and suffered and suffered. But I mean, to get here and to make it as simple as I could, and but I think the friends are a good example, and I wish I could just to explore them further in a subsequent work.
Is that the US cover that you just had in your hands?
Yeah, that's the US cover. Yeah.
Oh, so
this,
nice.
This is the UK cover. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite cover? Which is your favorite?
I don't know. I don't.
Don't back out, Stephen.
No, I don't have a favorite. I mean, they're both wonderful covers, honestly. And I mean, if you look at them together, side by side, you see how they are like in conversation with each other. With both,
yes.
I mean, you can claim, okay, this is Andy and all, right? But and this is who he desires. This is who this is who he's been made to be, and you could even see a stereotype here. I mean, like Marilyn Monroe, like stereotyped to Africa, right? It's a narrative about Africa, and it's just wonderful. I love how the UK cover, of course, shows with the tone of the book, and I mean, just the colors and all, like how vibrant it is. They are both wonderful covers. I'm just hugely privileged to have such wonderful covers, and
they're amazing.
Yeah.
And listen, I know you're doing a PhD. I know this has only just come out. Your novel comes out in 3 days in the UK. Is that right? The 13th of April. Right. Amazing. Yeah. Now, I know it's only coming out in 3 days, your debut novel. I know you're still working on a PhD, but are we going to see a second novel from you? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, definitely. I mean, except something crazy happens. I mean, for example, ChatGPT comes up and writes way better than all writers, and being a writer becomes pointless, right? So except for that and all, but even if that happens, I mean, I will still be writing, right? So I mean, I have many wonderful things to explore and to discover. Like being Nigerian as a writer, it's a wonderful thing. You have like a billion things to write about. Sometimes I just think I'm sure that many perhaps Western writers might envy me or envy people like me, right? I mean, because Nigeria, as I said, I mean, all you just need to do is just to walk along the Nigerian street or something, and you just see like 10 ideas, 10 novels to write about, and you just, what is this person going through in life? You just think, and there's so many fascinating things to write about. I mean, even historically, write about historical events, so many historical events that have not been written about. Yeah, I'm hoping perhaps write about someday. And of course, like, I mean, looking to the future, like my country's, things are getting worse and worse. Everything is crumbling, and I always wonder, like, what would the country be like in the next 20, 30 years, you know? And that's something wonderful to write about, just to think about that. And so we'll see, but definitely I'm looking forward to writing my next novel, and I just can't wait to get into that huge feeling that feels as though you've taken LSD or something. Although, I mean, to the police me around, I've not taken it, so don't come for me. I don't know how it feels like, but I think that's what it should feel like. I mean, when you have a wonderful idea and everything is flowing perfectly, like, I don't think there's anything that comes close to that, honestly, to that feeling. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I cannot wait for your next novel already. I'm already impatiently
waiting. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, before we let you go, we always like to finish on a good recommendation. So do you have any recommendations for us, whether it be books, TV, film, anything?
Yeah, I mean, on my table here, actually, I have some books. I don't know whether you've read them. I mean, I've not read this, but I think it's for what I've heard about it, I think that's Mr. by Guy Gunaratne. I'm not sure whether I pronounced this one incorrectly, but he's also the author of Mad and Curiosity. So I think I've not read it yet, but I think it's a wonderful book, and I just can't wait to start. But I've read this one. I don't know whether you've read this, Black Sunday by Tolaro Tibi Abraham. It's a Nigerian novel. I love this book. For its sense of place. Some books about Nigeria for me, are more about the characters, about the Nigerians themselves, and not more about the place. But this does the place so well, and I think, and I can't wait to visit it. It's just reanimated many of my memories about growing up in Nigeria. Yeah, I really, really loved it. And yeah, many books, of course. But these ones are just on my table, so I'm going to recommend them.
Amazing. No, they are wonderful. I'm obsessed with both of those covers as well. They're gorgeous. I love a cover. Now, that is unfortunately all we've got time for today. Stephen, it was so wonderful talking to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a wonderful conversation we've had. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for your amazing book. Now, listeners, you can buy The 5 Sorrowful Mysteries of Andy Africa, and I insist you buy it and read it immediately. I will pop a link in the show notes for you to buy it that way, or head to your local bookshop. It is out on the 13th of April, so will be out by the time this episode is released, which is very exciting. And I think it's also going to be out this is for our UK listeners, but it's also going to be out in the US this month as well. Is that right?
Yes, on the 18th of April.
On the 18th of April. Amazing. So yes, UK and US listeners, you both have to get run into your bookshops because you need to buy this book. And Stephen, is there anywhere our listeners can find you on social media, or are you not on social media?
Yes, sadly, I'm currently not on social media. I used to be years ago, but I had to run away to just get to finally write, right? Yes. To just, to take away, to get away from the world so I could see the world clearer, right? And but hopefully in the future, let's see anyway. But yeah, currently I'm not on social media.
But they're just gonna have to read your book to hear from you. So listeners, thank you so much for listening as always. And if you would like to follow us, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. But thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you as well for joining us on a bank holiday. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, really wonderful to be here. Thank you.